The Chicago Cubs are in the worst spot for an MLB franchise to be in. They're rebuilding while trying to compete, and that's never a recipe for success in any sport. The Cubs enter 2021 in a tough situation. After winning a World Series championship in 2016, things slowly went downhill year by year with the same core that ended their 108-year World Series drought. They decided to keep it together for one last rodeo, and it started off well. On June 24th, they no-hit the Los Angeles Dodgers, which put them a season-high 9 games over 500, but following the no-hitter, things would quickly go south. Chicago would go on to lose 12 consecutive games and 18 of their next 24, and less than a week before the trade deadline, the Cubs were now 3 games under 500 and had no choice but to blow it up. Between July 30th and July 31st, Anthony Rizzo was traded to the Yankees, Javier Baez to the Mets, Bryant to the Giants, Craig Kimbrell to the White Sox, and Andrew Chafin to the Athletics. It marked the end of the Cubs' core over the last 7 years and the beginning of a rebuilding era in Chicago, or so we thought. The Cubs would go on to finish 71-91, fourth in the NL Central, and after what looked like to be the start of a rebuild, they went into the offseason as spenders. Altogether, the Cubs spent over $200 million in free agency last offseason. Japanese sensation Zaya Suzuki was brought in on a 5-year deal, Marcus Stroman signed a 3-year deal, Yan Gomes got a 2-year deal to back up Willison Contreras, and Jonathan Villar, Drew Smyly, Michael Gibbons, Andrelton Simmons, David Robertson, Chris Martin, and Clint Frazier all got 1-year deals. Despite the offseason additions, the Cubs struggled in 2022, going 35-57 in the first half, but turned things around in the second half, going 7 games over 500. They only won 74 games in 2022, but the success in the second half gave the front office a sign of optimism going forward, and once again, the Cubs have been big spenders in free agency. Cody Bellinger was brought in on a 1-year $17 million deal. Jameson Taillon signed a 4-year $68 million deal. Brad Boxberger was added for the back end of the bullpen. And of course, yesterday, the Cubs brought in Dansby Swanson. They've now gone out the last 2 winners and showed they are willing to spend money to improve, but have made questionable decisions during that time. Willison Contreras, who was their best offensive player in 2022, signed with the Cardinals this offseason, and at this year's trade deadline, the Cubs didn't trade him, despite not competing, and didn't offer him a contract in free agency. The same applies with Ian Happ, who isn't a free agent until after 2023, but was drawing a ton of trade interest at the deadline after an all-star first half. They decided to hold on to him, and his production fell off in the second half, and if he walks next offseason, it's another mistake by Chicago, who could have capitalized at the deadline. Luckily for the Cubs, they have made out well on some of their recent trade returns, and developed one of the better farm systems in baseball, and currently have 3 top 100 prospects. Pete Crow Armstrong was acquired for Javier Baez, Kevin Alcantara was a part of the Anthony Rizzo package, and Brennan Davis is a homegrown talent. The reality is, the Cubs are still a few years away from competing, despite a poor NL Central division. Going into 2023, the Brewers and Cardinals have much better rosters, so at best they are a third-place team, and the rest of the NL is pretty stacked for them to sneak in the wild card. By the looks of it, it appears they will be trying to contend in the near future, and a big market like Chicago will help them land free agents, but on the outside looking in, I question their decision-making and how they're approaching the future.